Wouldn't mind doing a roll call. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We're a little bit behind schedule. It's 5:40 today, April 10th. And if you can call the roll.
Commissioner Arevalo, Commissioner Ayala, Commissioner Burleson, Commissioner Meeks,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward, Commissioner Tomites.
Here. Before we get started with our citizen comment period, if there's anybody watching or watching this in the future, obviously this board is saddened by the loss of one of our pillar members, Jim Garber. Was taken from us in a very rapid fashion. He was so involved in our community for probably the last 15 years, every single year, and had volunteered and served the citizens of this community on so many boards and commissions. He was our vice chair. And a lot of the items that we had gained consensus on, and a lot of the discussions that we had were in large part due to a lot of his comments and input throughout. So as we move forward, quite a bit of what we're going to do has Jim's signature on it, has his handwriting on it. And I know that all of us are trying to find our way through with finishing our work without him. There was some discussion of whether or not to put a replacement on for the final meeting or two. And we kind of decided against that simply because it really wouldn't be fair to the new person and not fair to those of us who have sat through all these meetings, but also for Jim's memory, I think, Amy, I know that you worked with Jim probably closer than anybody here, and maybe Michelle as well at the planning commission. But if you had any words that you say,
Thank you.
welcome to.
Yeah. My crowd was that. I just, Jim was so unique because the breadth of his knowledge was astounding. The depth of his knowledge was more so. And the way that I think Jim really served the community so well was he married the two together. He wove the two together so well. Like I've said before, some people, he listened so openly and he fought for what he thought was right so strategically. He was so adept at helping the community be better. And that's what I think I miss. And I feel like I was still learning. I'm not ready to let it go. Because he was just such a good leader. He was such a good teacher. He was so, it was just so easy to be with him, to listen to him. And like I said, he knew so much. So I definitely will miss him. I notice his absence. But, we all are going to try to step up and do what we can to honor him and to keep going. So I appreciate you mentioning he was such a big part of the city in the last decade.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if anybody's watching, as you can see, we've honored Jim. We've put his name tag out on his usual seat in these meetings. Does anybody else have any words that they want to offer? I know it's not easy, especially for those of us who've worked so closely with Jim over the years, but and I think it also sends the message that life is really, really short and can be taken away quickly, because we were all with Jim like to the very end.
We all talked to him that day.
We all talked to him that day. Yeah.
12:30, and then all of a sudden he wasn't here by 5.
And there was no no hint, no sign of illness.
He was going full force.
Yeah, so we were just saying some final respects to Jim as our vice chair. And we put out his name tag in honor of him. But that being said, if there's no other thoughts on that, I'll go ahead and do we have anyone signed up for citizen comment? So I'll move us forward to our approval of our minutes from last week. If anybody would like to make a motion to read those minutes. Okay, I have a motion from Yancy and a second from Amy. If we can get a roll call on the minutes.
Commissioner Arevalo?
Aye.
Commissioner Ayala?
Yes.
Commissioner Burleson?
Yes.
Commissioner Meeks?
Yes.
Commissioner Ward? Commissioner Smiles?
Aye. Okay, our second item to discuss early on in this meeting is the future meeting dates. Sam and I had a short discussion this afternoon about kind of the timeline of what we think will happen in terms of finishing what we're going to finish this evening, and then Sam's work in preparing potential ballot language for us to consider and approve, vote on at our next meeting. And then due to some scheduling and travel that I have in May to make our final presentation and turn it over to the city council, hopefully on the 6th. That works with their schedule. So that leaves us with the need to have one final meeting after tonight. And we were hoping to be able to do that 2 Thursdays, but everybody's got to be available. We have a conditional, there's a 3rd Thursday that we could do it, but just wanted to get everybody's take on the calendar. So that would be the 24th.
Thursday, 24th.
Get a break next week.
Yes,
Okay.
but these,
That would be our final meeting, we think, and then you would present to council on the 6th.
yes,
Okay.
that's the goal.
Okay.
I know Rob has, and I know he's coming this evening, and we'll ask him as well, just to confirm that. I know he lost his mom. And after a very lengthy life, and she lived in another state, so I know that they are having a memorial service that he's traveling back to spend some time with his family. I asked him briefly, but he was so busy with work today that I didn't really want to push it in terms of scheduling. So we'll confirm it with Rob that the 24th works, but I wanted to get y'all's take, commitment, if you can make the 24th.
Yes.
Okay. So let's see what he comes up with, and if he's not sure, we have that following Thursday to consider, or really any other day, just to complete our work. So let's pencil it in for the 24th, and we'll see what happens when Rob gets here to confirm. And then finally, we're at a point where, we've done our first blush through all 12 sections. We still have a few things that we were unable to complete in our last meeting, and we'll pick up where we left off there. And then if there's, any thoughts, I want to do a hard stop at 8 if possible. which means we're gonna have to have our conversations and then try to come to some consensus. So, since these are probably gonna be second rounds of conversations, I'm hoping that we can be concise and then, people have had a little time to think over the last couple of weeks. So if it's all right, I guess, we'll just take them in the order where we started last week. We started on and let me preface the conversation by saying, if we have there's 5 of us, if there's a split in the voting and it's not unanimous, doesn't get 4 votes, nothing happens without 4, then we'll pick up with Rob when he gets here on it. If that's okay with him. Because he might be a decider. So we'll just tell us where you are at, Rob. So the first one that we started with at the last meeting, and then we'll just go that way, was the section, what was that section? I think it was the section with the Planning and Zoning Commission about the every 5-year conference.
Right.
I think that was 703.
702.7.
7027. Everybody wants to get out in front. Charter says 5 years. I know we talked about 10 years. I think we could even go 8 years. Just to have it be in service for a little bit. I know there was conversations with the planning director, just, informally about and those were, doable. I don't want to put words in her mouth or say what she said, but those were not outrageous to her.
What were the options again you talked about?
Well, we mentioned that we were talking about 10. We thought maybe we could do less. She kind of didn't have any issues with those.
She just thought that, I'm asked her because she's with us setting on P and D. Watching how this all played out. You're sitting here, you're barely getting these plans to function together and work together, and all of a sudden, you have something in the charter that says 5 years and it's overkill. Because they've not even really implemented the new one in 5 years. So I just point blank asked her what was her thought. And she said 8 to 10 years. She said, because you're giving it time to actually be cohesive with all the other plans, and that there was always the option to, I think the question that we had was, is there an option that you could go and, tweak something if you needed to and change it? And it was yes. And that would be a lot better than wasting I don't want to say wasting, but using a lot of resources to work on something that hasn't even really gotten a chance to be functional.
Any other thoughts?
I say 10 so that if council knocks it down, we're not back at 5. Maybe they would take it to 8. I don't know. I like the 10 years because I just think that it's a good plan. Like we're looking at CIP, we're looking at all these things that take time, and you're trying to do it according to all these other plans, but it's never, then you're already working on something else that's gonna change, and then you're having to change everything else. So I like 10, just from my personal experience with this, I like 10.
So let me just get the wording right. Thank you for that. So if we say at least once every 10 years, they could do it earlier if they thought there was a need. But they can't go longer than 10 years without leaving the middle.
That's correct.
Okay.
Sets a minimum threshold at least every 10, yes.
Isn't that the language that's in there now?
Yes, sir.
At least,
It's at least every 10, at least once every 5 years. It's proposed at least once every 10 years.
well, maybe, perhaps, let me just ask it this way. Do we feel like it should be more than 5? That's the first question, maybe.
Yes.
Let's see if there's, okay, so I think we all agree on that. So now it's just a matter of a number. And, you know, I'm open to hearing.
There's one other thing too.
Yeah, sure.
That maybe we should say 8, because at the time they start working on it, it takes at least, 2 years to complete?
It can,
The
historically.
comp plan? Oh, the last
Like
one,
this
they've
last
taken
one
much
took
longer.
4 years.
Yeah.
But it was, I don't know why, I don't wanna speculate, I've heard different things of why, but
It was 6 years start to finish for everything. Comp plan and LDC, but LDC is something separate and that's not in the charter, right?
No.
see, I still like.
And they go
but
together.
I just wanted to bring that out, that it does take them time to work on it, to get it into,
That would justify the 10.
that would justify the 10.
So now it should work as planning staff. Once they do it once, that sequence will be every 10 years. They probably have to start, the staff will, planning a year ahead to get it to the commission to start with your recommendations. Yeah, it's,
Maybe if we put a stipulation that staff should start prior in order to have it. An overview in 10 years or so, I don't know, you know what I mean?
yeah, it doesn't say, hold public hearings, make recommendations. 5 years. Well. I'm not quite sure how we do that in terms of putting a hard date for staff to start that. I think they have it on their calendars to start the process. I don't know that the actual recommendation of the commission comes on that 10-year date, but I know historically with 5 years, they're already working that into their calendars.
Yeah, and they're probably, the first step is the city council hiring a firm to do the work. Because the staff doesn't, I mean, they do it all with the contractor, with the consultant.
Who keeps up with all of this? And that's a-
Planning director would definitely know.
Well, then I think that we leave it to them, because they're confident, they know their job, they know what they
Yeah.
have to back,
Yeah,
you know.
And see, that's another reason why I didn't like the 5, is because like you got it done, so now they're already starting to try to update something that hasn't even really been in effect. Cause if you're saying within 5 years and it's taken 2 to 3 years, or the last one took 6, they're already gonna start and it's like, oh, you know, I just think it's crazy, but that's it.
So are we thinking 10 years and we were trying to, I think last time we had the conversation, the difference between an update, like tweaking versus an entire new rewrite, right? So are we changing the language on C to make it known that that's what we mean?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why, only because to me, it's always meant a rewrite, and it says, what's the word, complete?
It says
The
entire.
And
And so typically you don't mess with the comprehensive plan unless you're gonna redo it. I mean, you can amend it. It's not hard. It just takes a couple of public hearings and all that. And if you want to amend the LDC, same deal. But I don't, yeah. I
so
don't,
it does say, so there's a couple things before that subsection C, and one is an annual public hearing on the plan and recommend any necessary or desirable changes. So that's kind of like those fixes that once a year we saw something and it's not working, even in the first year. And this does say
Yeah.
every once a year that will happen, an annual public hearing. And staff is the one that should do that. So that gives you the opportunity to have those in-between fixes. And then, in B, make recommendations to council regarding updates to the land use and transportation elements of the plan at least once every 3 years. So again, that's, and they've done that. They've changed those future land use maps because, there's some sort of pushback or we're seeing unintended consequences. They've modified those maps. And then transportation, I suspect the reason transportation is every 3 years is because just the way the city's growing,
Yeah.
a chance to evaluate your future roadway plan.
I wouldn't know this.
My only concern about is that I think it really needs to be 8 years. I mean, at least. And I'm just kind of hesitant to say 8, then it's 6. That's what they come up with.
So,
And that,
Concern.
I have that concern because based on our preliminary presentation, there's already, feedback. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. Well, maybe we just could get our work done and then you could tell us you're not going to do it.
Did you have them write down all the stuff that they put back on?
I didn't write it at the time, but there wasn't much. There was a few, but not much. There was some queuing back and forth on some things that I think there would be. Some very.
But there was not a 4-member thing where 4
No.
members direct.
There was only like 3
It
people.
was more comments.
Yeah, there was
right?
just 3 minor questions.
Wasn't really anything,
A formal consensus to do it.
just that mayor's thing,
There's a few questions.
just a question.
What were you gonna say, Yancy? Like, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like what Michelle said earlier, we asked for 10 and they give us 8.
And
That's what I'm afraid of.
Could we do a recommendation that gave like 8 to 10? And that tells them we don't want to go lower than 8, basically? I mean, I don't know, did they listen to that?
well, here's the deal. The recommendation that we make is in a form of a charter
No,
amendment.
it has to be specific.
So we have to be very specific. Now, they know, yeah, they
But we can add language that.
can accept, deny, or modify anything.
What, I suppose in the presentation of the council, it could be mentioned to them, it could be mentioned that there was discussion of 8 years or however you want to do it, but here's the language, but you could certainly add to the conversation. You want to give them more facts, even if that's something if we wanted to put it in the background in writing, different ways.
And they'll have had the presentation for a week prior to the meeting, so I'm sure if there's pushback on 10, we'll hear about it.
Previous to you actually presenting.
Oh, no.
I'm like,
Yeah, no, probably not.
Ask though, if they think it should be less, why we got 10.
It could be show up on the message board, or, what is it? So anyway, but it sounds like we have consensus for more time. We seem to be around 10. We have probably a dead minimum of 8. A drop deadline of 8. So do you want to recommend 10 or do you want to recommend 8?
I'd like to recommend 10.
You're at 10. Okay. So we have consensus to produce a proposed charter amendment for 10-year intervals with the same wording. We're just changing the number. That'll be, I think, a simple decision for them. Which is part of getting these past council to the voters. Because,
You could explain, or you just get up and.
no, I gave context of our meetings. I referred to some notes where with actual numbers. We had one person and five, you know what I mean? I gave them some pretty good context when they asked. It'd be my hope that they would ask on everything. But, you know, they have 700 other pages to get through that night anyway, so I get it. Okay, so I'm hearing that that's on 7027. Okay, so the next one would be, Daniel, your recommendations from,
Zoning.
you had a lobbying recommendation and a planning and zoning, so I'll let you choose whichever one you want to start with.
We did the one that, like, I wrote the language for that I told you guys about before, which was 7.01 planning and zoning commission.
701
B,
B.
it starts off the same, to be eligible for appointment to the commission, same thing. The change then goes, at least 6 commission members must have resided in the city for a period of at least 5 years, and at most 3 members may have resided in the city for at least 2 years before the date of appointment. That's the only change.
Commissioners, conversation?
I thought this one, and then I asked around to see how, like, what would this do? Most people said that that's too in-depth. It would be too much to try, Clark and all them to try to figure out. You know, just like now, Jim has to be replaced, so they're gonna solicit new members. So now you gotta try to go figure out who's over here, who are new applicants, rather. You know, they just said that that gets too confusing. It needs to be a hard number. Either it's 5 years, 3 years. P and Z's come a long way. It used to be to where what you have to own property and all that, like all these other stipulations. And
It probably said he who serves on has to own his house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just saying, we see, still see evidence.
That's gonna be.
We're gonna change that, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely. And so, I think a lot of people have pushback on that, because I ask around, did you ask anybody? Like, what do y'all think, or what would be a good number, or give us some suggestions on this one? And a lot of people, and even the last time I talked to Jim, he's like, I'm stuck on 5. And the reason was, I think, just what we said. And it's coming full circle with everything that we're seeing happen lately, is that people, I just want someone to truly be vested in San Marcos and not come in and make decisions like they moved here, but maybe they're really, like, they want to be really involved, and that's good. There's a lot of ways to be involved, but really truly be vested and not be in a position to make decisions for us who have lived here forever and continue to live here, that then they're making decisions, but they might move on. And then we're stuck with some of these decisions that people are making, because I'm looking at some of the things that we've been dealing with lately, and it's a big deal. Like, it's like, okay, this is gonna affect us for Networry. So you get someone that comes in and they're in a mentality of, oh, this is great. Let's build these apartments up here. Let's do all these things. But then in a couple of years, they may be gone, but we're the ones here having someone, not just us, but people vested in San Marcos are having to deal with this forever. And so it's like, okay, what are you thinking here? Because, you know, how do we address that? That people on P and Z and even this committee, I think they really need to be vested because we're talking about things that really affect everyone as a whole in San Marcos. And I'm just real concerned about that. But I asked a few staff and they were like, oh God, it's already hard enough when it comes to appointments for y'all to be dividing it. Y'all just need to come up with a hardcore
For
number.
everybody, that's
For everybody, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yancy?
I don't know, I mean, I understand your argument, but the same can be said for someone who's lived here for a long time, right? That, you know, maybe they don't have the best interests of the people, but want to be on this commission and can be because they've been here for longer than 5 years. I just think it's keeping out people who I just think it's keeping people out. I think it's gatekeeping. And so I would like to give people an opportunity to be on P and Z who, are compelled to despite not having lived here for 5 years, right? And I think back to John's story that he gave us. And his decision on why he decided back then at least for 3 years minimum. And so, but you know, staff's input is also important. And so if they want to keep it like at 1 for everybody, I would say.
So just, I don't want to push on the spot, but just
No, it's
for
fine.
clarification. Are you saying that, because I think we didn't vote, we just had consensus. And we went around the table before, and I think it was 3 members said 5 years, 3 members said 3 years. Daniel's introduced something new. Are you supportive of the language that Daniel's provided, or are you saying that 3 years, just a simple 3 years?
I like the language that you provided, Daniel. But, you know, from listening to Michelle's feedback, from staff especially, I think I would go back to 3 years.
For 3, okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Amy?
Well, I'm not sure, so I need to be clarified what you're saying, so are you saying you want 3 years for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't feel comfortable. I do understand, and I love your language, I think that's like splitting the baby. And I do think that it does still give the preponderance of the weight of the commission to people who have lived here a long 5 years, which makes me feel good about it, makes me feel more comfortable about it. I do understand new people may want to get involved. I just think that it takes longer to really understand the city, to know the different feelings and the vibes, and, you know, the city is varied. And for that reason, I do feel most comfortable keeping it at 5. If we go to your language, that's my second level of comfort. I feel okay with that, but I would prefer just to keep it at 5 for
Okay.
people.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm gonna do this. And I'm assuming you're good on your numbers, so leaving it there for now. I'll just weigh in and say, I'm thinking about this, 2 things. One is length of time. And I get the whole gatekeeping thing. Because I feel like I was gatekeeped at a point. But, and I also sometimes feel like, this is really off the subject, but I do feel like, you know, you need new blood, you need new vision. You have to, move forward as a city or you're in trouble. You're gonna hurt the city by stifling growth, or creativity, or, and there's people coming. We can't stop that. There's a lot of people coming, but at the same time, you can look back and see, some of the patterns of things like that, like with what Planet P and Z deals with, growth patterns essentially. And things get approved and get built. It's like, oh my, when did that get approved, right? I mean, we've all had that feeling as well. But my opinion sometimes is someone's great place to live. I may not like it, but they may love it. It might work perfectly for them. But that's beside the point. What my main issue with the language that you provided is the simplicity factor. And I'm not talking about staff. I'm talking about, because I know what staff had to go through with split qualifications for boards and commissions, because there are a few. And it stunk. I mean, it was like, that was the wrong word. I'm sorry. I don't mean your language stinks. It was hard to wrangle those positions in the right slots. And so I'm much more in favor of a simpler, this is the number. And so that's where I'm coming from. I actually did talk a little bit about this with Jim that day. And, I'm not going to change to 5, but it wouldn't be the end of the world for me if we were completely at 5. But I do feel like 3 is, that's a pretty good commitment to the community, and you might have a ton of good things to offer. And, we get business people here that, like I did, I moved here to open a business. That's how I ended here, because it was the ability to service San Antonio and Austin from here. And bought a house that, before I got here. And so I felt like I was kind of vested after a few years. Got involved in some neighborhood stuff. So I didn't know a whole lot, but I knew something. I knew enough to get appointed, but they didn't think so. But anyway, so I'm still at a simple process, and I'll stay in 3 years. There's not consensus with that.
When we circle back around, Rob, it's here and ask.
Yeah, we're gonna have to ask Rob to see what his take is on that one. I think on the other one, we're pretty clear consensus on that, but I kind of felt like this one would be a little bit split, so we will. Before we do that though, I'm gonna try to take a accurate take on the. There he is. There's the man. Yay. That's all right. And so before we finish this one, and we're gonna get Rob's input on this one. But before we do that, I'm gonna go around, and I think what I heard, I'm gonna list this as a simple 3. Is that inaccurate for your decision?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a simple 3. You have a simple 5. And Rob, we are, start thinking about it, because we're talking about
The 3 and 5 on,
Yes, sir.
PNC. Yeah, PNC, okay.
So we have simple 3, simple 3, simple 5, simple 5. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, that's what we had. Daniel has the hybrid, I'll call it. Is that an accurate viewpoint? And what we haven't spent that much time on this one. Michelle had some thoughts on the process of, from a staff point of view of, I don't want to say vetting candidates, or vetting applications, but sorting the application and making sure they're, and I say the word simple because 3 years or 5 years is just a simple way to, that's a simple qualification. 3 years or 5 years. Yancy said 3 years, and Daniel had introduced the hybrid. So if you need us to restate our thoughts on it, we can.
What is,
I'll ask
what is
you.
the hybrid? I mean, the 3 and 5, I pretty much know, but what's your hybrid, Dave?
All right, so in 701, right, it says to be eligible for appointment, and then that's the original. And then the change that I made was to make, it says after that it reads, at least 6 commission members must have resided in the city for a period of 5 years. And at most, 3 members may have resided in the city for at least 2 years.
What was it, 3 years?
So,
2 years.
3 members who resided in the city for at least 2 years.
2 years, okay, so it's a 5 and 2, basically, is it?
What, 6,
It's a shifting 5 and
Yeah.
2,
Okay.
right?
6 members for 5 years?
So it is 6 commission members resided for 5 years
Okay.
and 3 commission members resided for 2 years, right?
Okay.
And then it's a sliding,
Because I just realized after, if somebody gets on, if we go with this and somebody gets on, one of the 3 members gets on for, they've been here 2 years and then they get on for a 3-year term, then they're eventually maybe gonna move up, they can become one of the 6.
Right.
And then. move
right,
up.
and then it'll
You know,
be the
there's
numbers.
a-
So that's kind of what I wanted to address, right, because I heard Michelle's comments and if planning and zoning, because I've never applied for planning and zoning, right? But if it's similar to how it is for this one, where you write your name down, you put how many years you've been here, right? And then any like qualifying criteria, right, for why you should be in the zone. You self-identify, right? I don't know how much goes into confirming how long someone's been here, right? But you kind of sign that you're telling the truth as to what you're saying on there, right? So it'll be difficult to determine who's been here and who's not. It's kind of like I mean, other than you guys, the city being afraid and you seeing something unique, that's something that can be on an individual basis, but the board, more than likely, is gonna be 5 years always, right? And there's gonna be those, like, we call them the unicorns, right, that come in, and that leads accessibility for a unicorn to come in and have a spot, right? You still have those still 5-year members, and they do transition, right? They, after 2 years, you transition. You're kind of like in between at that point, but you're still, you have the ability for continuation according to what it says on there. And then you're good. That's why I left it at most and at least, which allows you to grow and then change into something else, right? So that's why I find that language is the most inclusive and still gives a lot of power to 5, because nobody can come in that's only lived here for a couple of years, make up a storm, and then leave because they have no true voting power at that point, because there's only 3, right?
See, here's another thing that everyone's not thinking, just like Jim just left us. Now someone has to fill Jim's spot, so they may only get a year position. So it's gonna be difficult to be fair, because when you're looking at being fair across the board, then I don't want to have applied and I've only been here 2 years, but then it's kind of difficult they're gonna have to try to figure out, well, okay, you've only been here for 2 years, but I've got all these people that have been here for 5 years. How are you? Well, in the long run anyway, city council makes the decision. That's just a criteria. But I think that just like this last time, I think they said there were 3 or 4 people that applied that had never even served on the city board, only lived in the city for 1 or 2 years. That was a problem because, and then when they actually put them on another board. And one lady actually said, oh my God, I didn't even know what P and Z was. See, some people just go in and they just start filling out, but they really don't have a clue what it is. And they get on there and it's like, because I think that some of us, even in the beginning, it was like, oh, wow, like what just happened, this is crazy. So it's a lot. And if you don't, like you come in and you're new to town, and like you just said, there's all these different segments. Like, I can think of calling people from 5 or 6 different areas saying, hey, this is what we're discussing, what do you think? And they had good reasons why they were like, I think you should even own property. How are you gonna come here and tell us what to do and you're not even invested enough? And I'm like, that ship is sailed, that's never gonna happen again, you can forget that. Let's try to figure out, and they came up with a whole slew of other things. So I thought, wow, and I was really kind of amazed at, because that's one of the most important points, is how I see it. And I'm not just saying it because I'm on there, well, I guess I am, and I'm seeing what they're saying. So when you're calling different people and younger people, older people, just different people throughout San Marcos that live in different areas from different economic standpoints that know something about San Marcos, they had a very different viewpoint than even with some of us. And they even went back to, we're still angry that they took the part off about owning property. And I thought, why? And they said, because you're sitting here making all these plans for people, but I said, but people still might not want to own, but I know people that have lived here, been in an apartment or a townhome or whatever you want to call it for years. That, I don't think that should be penalized at all, to say that you can't, because you've been here. But there are other points, I get it. And I just think that, when you say, okay, you're putting them on there, but then if they get on there for that 1 year, just say if they're gonna fill someone's spot that left, they get on there for 1 year, they're already up again in another year to be voted on. So if they really didn't understand or have a clue, it makes it harder for them to continue. Because you don't just continue city council votes.
Yeah, would that change, right? Like I guess I get a counterpoint would be, it is the charter commission, would you consider it more important or less important or about the same as planning and zoning?
Not the same.
About the same. So I have never served on a city, or a city council, city committee, city board, city, any, right, have any kind. I came into this pretty new to the city as far as being involved. I've seen some meetings, I've been involved at the state level, I've been involved at the county level, but never served in, right? I would be one of those folks that has never served a committee, but I feel like my voice is one of those that
But how long
helps
have you
bring
lived
it
here?
to. I've lived here since 2001. Right.
Okay, so,
And
but you're not, but you're involved. So even though you haven't served on a committee, you've dealt with different things that pertain to the city. You're not ignorant to the city. Is
Right.
what so,
since 2013,
so, exactly.
right?
But think about the time that you're saying you've been here, you would actually, some people, like I just told you, clueless, don't have an idea, that's not you. But you wouldn't have the same issues that that person would have because you've been here since 2011. You might not have been on a city board, but you've been around and you're highly involved in other things that make you maybe just as qualified as to be on this committee. Because you've been around, you've seen other things, but what about the person that just moved here? They don't know the different dynamics of the city. They don't, it's not like you. You know the dynamics of the city because you're involved in politics. So you even come at it from an even different perspective, knowing different things about the law with politics or the state level, the county level. That's really no different than being involved. You could do any city. Just like you did this one just fine, but you didn't just move to San Marcos. You're not, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
You're in sync with what's going on.
Okay.
We're talking about someone that might just want to come because we've seen it and do this, but they don't even have a clue. That's what we were concerned about, but you're making real life decisions. You've been around, so you would be able to make a decision about things because you're really pretty informed where most people are. been served on a city board or not, you're extremely informed.
Right, no, I agree with you, and just to finalize,
Yeah.
the last thing I'll say, I agree with you wholeheartedly, right? And I'll say that I've been doing that since 2013, right, since 2013 is when I got involved with the Save the Sunrise River and everything that's happening. But the way it reads, in 2013, I would have been kept, right, from, if I wanted to run for a similar situation, in this case, I would have been kept from it being as involved, right, so at 3 years,
Until 2014,
until another year. Well,
if it was changed
if it
to
was
3 years,
If it
yeah.
was 3 years, it would be until 20. Unfortunately, didn't move in 2014 to Kyle and then had to come back, right? So I lived in Kyle for 2 years and then came back to San Marcos, right? But it's one of those things.
So we would have kicked you off.
So, you see what I'm saying? So,
All right, let's let Rob,
Let me ask you a couple questions. So Michelle, you just briefly, you are okay with 5 years?
I really thought about it because I really listened to what he had to say and then I went and asked
But I
questions.
mean, are you, but
But
you're
I'm
okay
firm
with
on
5
five.
years?
I'm
You're
firm on five now.
Okay, so Daniel, I actually like what you're saying with that. Because one of the things that I've heard before that we've talked about is that we have people that would be very qualified for planning and zoning that would like to get on the commission. That maybe have not been here for that time, and we're growing. You know, we've doubled in size in the 20 years I've been here. We've gone from 40,000 to 80,000 people. Okay, and so, and we're gonna continue to be growing. We've got to look at that going into the future. So I am more for this graduated, what Daniel's, saying. And I think to address your point, city council has got to approve you. Okay, and ultimately, it's not an election, per se. This is city council is responsible for putting the right people on this board. And so if, that somebody new that comes to town and they get on the board, well, I can blame city council for that. I don't know that we're going to be able to do too much more here with the guidelines.
But what we're talking about is going from changing it from 5 years and lessening it. That's a recommendation on the years.
For two of
For
the.
3.
For three.
For three of the 7,
No, it's 3 guidelines.
3 of the 9, excuse me, I'm sorry, 3 of the 9, wrong counselor. But so for 3 of the 9.
yeah, and the voting power still goes to.
6 of them.
but let's be careful with the voting power because it's
No,
not,
that's not voting power, that's not quite the
it's not
same.
really
In Roberts, that's a totally different, when you say voting power, that's something totally different.
Right.
Okay, but basically what you're saying is that you're gonna have 9 members. 3 of those are going to be at a 2-year level and the rest are at a 5-year level.
Minimum.
They could be, I mean,
They
they
could.
could.
It could naturally split to 8 to 1, right? 8 5-year members and 1 2-year.
Depends on their plot.
Depends on what the makeup of the board is. The makeup of the board decides who gets to jump on.
So then let me ask this,
let him,
let me ask this, that's good. Okay, let me ask this then. So if we have the situation where you have a vacancy, okay, is that then we can allow someone that is, if that vacancy was someone that was a 2-year level or versus a 5-year level, do we then have to replace with that 5-year or?
No, there is no requirement for either. So it's based on whoever you want to appoint, right? So, or
Okay.
to bring on that will, so in this case, let's say.
But no, because
I keep
you're
going
saying
here.
that only 3 of them could be
Right.
2 years, so if you've already, it would just automatically go back to a 5-year thing. But here's the problem
If
with
three.
yours, but here's the problem that we bring up again. You put, it's, I understand what staff is saying now, because say that like Jim's gone, so there's only gonna be, I think, a year left on his. So with only a year left being on his term, you go put a 5-year person on there, then it doesn't really matter who you put on there, because in that next year, they're off.
Right,
And they have to go through the process all over
Right.
again.
right. So that's why I think that argument doesn't really matter as far as who we put when we fill somebody in. Because no matter what, they're only gonna finish out the term, right? We're not talking about their long term. They're finishing out a term and then they gotta go again. What your question, right, whether it matters, whether you bring in a 2 or 3, that doesn't even matter with the writing. It only matters, are you bringing in a person? Cool. Does that person go against any of the requirements that have, or not requirements, but parameters set for a 3? No, it could be a 3 or a 2, anywhere, do they fall anywhere from above 2? Yes, then that person's good. Now, if there are 3 people already on that board, right, that are at 2 years, you could not bring another 2-year person on. Right?
Right.
If there are 2, you still have a space. If there's only 1, you could bring in 2 if necessary, right? So it's,
It shows.
I'm gonna interrupt you for just for a second, because this is my issue. It took you a long, I'm looking at it from a city council member's perspective. Not just the staff, because they have all time in the day to think about it. But I'm looking at a city council's perspective. And I got 700 pages of agenda that night. I've got 35 boards and commissions that need to be appointed. I'm also looking at it from a citizen standpoint. This is confusing. No offense. It's not confusing to you. You're a bright guy. You wrote it. This is confusing to the average citizen. And no offense to city council members, but I've seen some that would not grasp this.
yeah,
I'm sorry. And so I'm trying to be.
No, I get it.
So Sam,
Diplomatic,
This,
but let me finish and then
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you. I'm going to oppose this, not because you pointed out and I'm opposing it because I don't like the complication. I want to make it simple for not just the council members of the staff, but for the citizens who vote on it. I'm willing to go at 5 years if I have to. But I cannot introduce this complexity. And I know for what? Just to get somebody that's had 2 years instead of 3? Make them wait a year. It's not that big a deal. You're not going to lose. We already agree. We didn't vote on anything. I know you say we voted, but it's consensus at this point. There's just not that much difference here. And I'm not willing to, and I know the staff feels this way because I've talked to them. And it's they'll do whatever they have to do. They're not. But I've dealt with these types of hybrid memberships and it's a mess. It's I'm not saying it can't be done. It can be done, obviously. And if the majority of this board wants to do this, fine. But I want everybody to know why I'm not supporting it. And that's why I hope that's clear to everybody.
I want to be
Just my
clear.
opinion.
I like the idea. But I just, after talking to staff and everyone, it just seemed too complex. And they were like, Cardinals need to do a hard number for this. That's just too much. And then we have to try to go back and figure out, okay, who's on there now and how many years? And then what does this application, it would be too much.
Let's let Rob.
well, and I just wanted a little bit more, Sam, so from your perspective, from the legal side of things, how complicated does this get? Does it make it difficult for staff? Does it make it difficult for?
Well,
If we don't.
for legal, it's easy because we don't get involved in that. It's the planning staff that keeps track of those. And so, they got to maintain a chart or whatever, but the way it's written, right, it's not like we have a slot for a 2-year and a 5-year or whatever. But what it is still staff has to keep track, as Chair pointed out. That would be more of a staff question. Just them trying to keep track, okay, the vacancy was created, was that somebody who was on for 2 years or not? So then, they're gonna have to count of the 9 members. Well, who's been on 2 years? Can we get another person who's, less, what was it, 3 years or 2 years? I'm sorry, 2 years. Yeah, so they gotta go through that exercise.
Okay, so the other alternatives we've got are the 3 and the 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Daniel, I like your idea. I'm pretty much good with it, but listening to everyone else on this. I'm gonna just go on ahead and still go back. I've talked to a few people earlier today, that have been on planning and zoning before. So 3 or 5, said, okay, yeah, more for the 5, but we could go with the 3. I tend to be, again, wanting to get more people involved. I understand your feelings on new people coming in and that we could have havoc. Right.
It's not new people, it's not just new
It's
citizens coming to town, that's not what I'm saying, don't get me wrong.
Okay,
We're talking about people that don't know the city well.
right.
That's all
I
I'm
don't, it's just, I constantly, I can see, people being planted in it too, so that's just my tinfoil hat. Sorry.
No, I like it.
But we know development. But I mean, I'm still inclined to go for the 3. If it is coming down to, I can go for the 5. But I want to put my stick in at 3, but depending on where we go, I can go for a 5. Okay. Daniel, I think I'm gonna go ahead. I do like the hybrid. I just see that as John said, I see that as some complications. So
Okay,
that's mine for you.
okay. Before we continue debate, let me ask it a different way. What I did was just write down what I've heard on 3, 5, 2 hybrid. It's like my golf bag. Golfer's joke. I have a 2 hybrid. Anyway, I don't hear. Now I know where Jim was, but that's okay. I think we all. But I don't hear consensus for anything. I don't hear 4, 5. I don't hear 4. So what I am hearing, assuming you're at the same spot.
R3.
Okay, so what I am hearing is, I'm just gonna go to the 2 highest. We have 2 for 3 and 2 for 5. Does anybody want to change their vote?
And if you can't.
Well,
If you can't reach
Let me,
an agreement,
yeah,
5 is the default, right?
5 is the
That's already in there. So if you don't come up with something else, it just by default remains at 5.
remains.
So I think, I'll say this before I tell you where I change, right? Because I'll change, right? If I'm the only one, I'll change. I think that the complexity of the writing, right, which is 2 out of blah, 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 is no different to at least once every 10 years, right? It's the same writing that we just agreed, which is that is open for interpretation, right? However, the city councilman decide to go about it and say, okay, well, that's at least once every 10 years, so we can do it 5 times these 10 years, right? But we allow for that. So I think sometimes the whole too complex or not complex enough, and then knowing staff, right? Because I work with a political party. Staff hates how I tackle anything, so it's just a fact, right? Like changing things, changing what they've already done complicates things. Keeping track of however somebody, how long they've served, just a Google sheet. The Google sheet that changes automatically every year. I will change mine to 3 to allow for more accessibility so that we can. Oh, but I just wanted to say that the
Gotcha.
complexity issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So right now, I'm hearing 3 members for 3. I'm hearing 4 members for 3. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 2 members for 5. I don't want the 5s to feel. I mean, I get the 5. But, who knows what it's gonna be end up at. Council may accept 3, they might, I know there's council members gonna stick with 5.
But are there, so when
That's-
you have, so we have, when this commission has 4 votes and that is what goes forward?
Yes.
And do you say, will you say at city council, will you say the split vote?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I try to, even if it's I try to provide context. But when the board speaks, the board speaks, when the majority speaks. So I try to represent the board as a whole.
So, but do you say, so I guess.
I have given context, yes, with numbers,
Okay, so like with everything that you're.
not with everything, when they specifically asked.
But we're coming back with where we are gonna take.
Yeah, they're gonna see a
formal
vote.
per item. And they're gonna see item number, whatever,
Right.
3 years, from 5 years to 3, they're gonna see 4 in favor, 4 against, whatever it
Oh,
is.
okay.
Yeah,
So they
they'll
will
see that.
that.
Yeah, they'll see
That
that
would
in
be
the
a
minutes.
formal
I
vote.
think that's important
Yes.
to say, no, there wasn't.
And they'll see,
You know.
Complete total consent.
they'll see the name of the commissioners as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you look at that final report from 2021, they kind of, that was
Same
laid
thing.
out with the votes.
You need 4 to push it through to get to them, right?
Yeah. And they need 4 to get it on the ballot. See, my hope is that everything we've spent hours and hours and hours gets on the ballot, but it's not gonna be the case likely. So
Don't get our hopes up.
Yeah.
no, I mean,
You've been through this.
I said, I hope.
Yes.
And it's frustrating. Okay, there's one more, from Daniel, and do you wanna
So-
take,
Yeah, it's similar to when we talked about single member.
what section are we?
This is,
Oh,
ethics, technically,
You're right, it would be, and
under the new section that we changed into.
Okay, what number? I didn't know.
According to our,
Very loud.
our minutes, it would be
Article 12.
well. So you're talking about a new section in section 12.
yes.
Okay, I may have misunderstood
So-
you earlier today.
So
A
it-
recommendation versus an.
Yes,
Okay.
so. With what I have found from the city of Houston, city of Dallas, some of the other cities across the US that have lobbying is because they have already directed for there to be lobbying ordinances, right? So a lot of the language that I found, which I did find language that talks about lobbying and defines lobbying and gives you amounts and stuff that says cannot be part of their travel, lodging and food, right? But at minimum, $200 is spent in thinking about said ordinance is defined or any type of legislation. So my simple ask is that we make a recommendation to the city council to take up a lobbying ordinance, right? And they can decide whatever they want to make that ordinance be, and we can give them exemplars from other cities of what they've done. But it would be to make a recommendation to, just like we are for the public, we're the single member, right? We're not telling them do single member. We're telling them, hey, we think it's in your best interest to actually start seeking this out, right? Same thing for lobbying.
So let me be clear. So we're all on the same page. Are you saying that you're not recommending a charter amendment? You're recommending an ordinance?
Yeah.
Sam, don't, isn't there?
Hold on, let me get it from him.
From what I could find online the last time we spoke to Sam, there isn't true language, San Marcos ordinances that states,
We don't have a lobbying ordinance here.
right,
Let's
So there's none
speak
here. So it would be to recommend there to be an ordinance,
a lobbying ordinance.
a lobbying.
Okay. I want to be, you mentioned just something real quick about the single member district recommendation that we're going to do. And that's certainly the purview of the commission. But the reason that we're recommending a single member districts study at public education, because they asked for it. They had council members that wanted it. And so I just think they're on a little different playing field here, the lobbying ordinances versus the single member districts. So, okay,
I'm
go ahead.
confused, Daniel. So there's some wording that you want to put in where for this lobbying ordinance or what's? where-
So what I have written down, right, and it could be changed into actually adding it to the charter. It's just,
You're saying you want to add it to the charter?
well, I had left it either way, right? I had left it as just a recommendation for them to take on because we are splitting an ethics part of the charter, right? And lobbying falls under ethics and we don't have anything for that.
Okay,
So it would be to then say, you need to pursue, right, the seeking of making a lobbying ordinance. The similar way that we received, like you said.
In the charter, though? You're
In-
recommending that?
no,
Or just
in-
separate, like in a, okay.
Right. Similar to how when they got back to us about single member districts, right, they talked about like, this is what we want to do. We also recommend that you look into this as well, into having this. So that if it, for whatever reason, it comes right back to the next charter commission, right? And we can incorporate it into our charter because they've already told us, yeah, you're right, we looked into this, this is what we would like to do. Then we can kind of proceed as normal and make it, and try to do it in our charter.
okay, so
Or in our charter or as an ordinance?
Well, I mean,
Since you're right, well, I understood.
I think he's saying starting it as an ordinance.
Y'all should
Yes.
explore
An ordinance.
an ordinance, which would be our code
right,
versus the charter.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Rob.
no, that's what.
That was your question?
That was basically it, was because of the difference between the, charter versus ordinance, okay? If you were to put something into the charter, we do not have anywhere right now, in here anywhere for, lobbying, right?
No.
Okay.
It would fall under, it's similar to the ethics, so that's kind of be the general vicinity of something like that, but yeah.
That would be taking on a lot more complexity as far as the laws, I believe too, right?
There's a lot of detail that, well, this was going back to the single member district discussion. One of the, I think the reasons it got to the idea of asking council to study is because there's so many flavors of how you would approach that. And for this commission to just come up with the exact wording that the voters are going to approve and like, boy, we're bound by that without actually understanding what flavor and all that, whether there's support and.
But he's not even
So
recommending
this-
that.
Right, so the same
It's
thing.
not- I'm
I guess it's
taking,
just a question.
I'm kind of taking a step forward a little bit.
Okay.
That, okay, if this is something that you see, do you have it in enough of a structure that we could put something, is there a place to put?
So that's where I was going with that.
Yeah.
So it's similar to the single member district in the sense of what is it actually gonna look like that we're gonna put before the voters? And I will say it's a lobbying ordinance. They can be lengthy and complex and it's, yes, legally, we can put it, charter amendment, but is this the venue to work out all the parameters of that?
Right.
Or is it to say, council, we sure think y'all should explore it? It's because otherwise you're gonna have to hash out all the complexities of the ordinance, which is prior to the commission, but it's not typical to have that level. of
Thank you,
detail.
John, thank you for that.
No,
I just
I get it.
wanted to see what my options, I like to see what the options.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna make a statement and then I'll pass it on to Amy here, or whoever wants to go next. I'm gonna oppose any recommendation to do the lobbying ordinance. And I'll tell you why. We tried it. We had a 10 or 12-page lobbying ordinance. And it made every one of our neighbors and every one of our citizens who were involved in city affairs a lobbyist. And it had some council support, not enough. Because once people got wind of the fact that, you know, if you're on the Calaboose Museum Board, or you're on the Planning Commission or the Heritage Association, and you're on behalf of the radio station and whatever, you became a lobbyist. So I'm opposed to, obviously, you're not making a recommendation to put it in the charter, and I thank you for that. It is something that if our elected officials want to do, they could do it tomorrow. But I'm also opposed to making a recommendation from this board to something that I just hope we don't do that, because I don't think it's connected to something that they were interested in. They never asked for it. I know there are council members that are not interested at all. I know that. There may be some council members that are still, but there's council members that are there now. No, Jane, obviously, but
From the last,
from the last go around.
seems like that was around 2020?
I want to say it was just pre-COVID. So
Yeah.
2018 to 2019, I know that was working its way through the process, but and lobbying may work for a big city like Houston. It may be absolutely necessary for certain cities, but we are not there yet. I mean, I don't want to stifle communication between anybody and my elected officials, nor do I want to have to put an onerous requirement of reporting or naming people that you communicate with over at HEB on a city issue. I am dead opposed to that. So I just wanted to make my position clear on it and the reasons why. But they had it.
Was there an ordinance before?
There was a 12-page proposed lobbying.
Oh,
And it got into the details because lobbying ordinances by their nature have to be very detailed. You know, because there's requirements and there's definitions of who's a lobbyist. And it divided the community because good people on both sides said, wait a minute. And the other people said, well, wait a minute, I'm a taxpayer. I shouldn't have to be considered a lobbyist. I'm part of the Lions Club. You know, we're considering the Lions Club contract at our next Parks meeting next week. And last week they were in force, as the Lions Club tends to be. And I can tell you firsthand that every single one of those Lions are committed members of this community and have been for decades. And you know, they're doing fantastic work, but you know, they're not lobbyists, they're citizens. So that's my perspective on it. I remember going through it. I was there when the discussion was occurring. And then I left and it hadn't been decided, but I'm not interested in it being on a charter, and I'm not interested in it being part of a charter recommendation like single member districts. I think that's inappropriate. My opinion.
Well, my
Go.
comment is really more of a question. Do we need it? It sounds like what your perspective is that it would muck up the system, complicates it in a way that doesn't need it. We're not having a problem. It sounds like you're thinking.
I thought it was a solution in search of a problem. I mean, there's, you know, I think there were accusations of ethics and oh gosh, you talked to somebody. Who cares? I mean, you still have to vote in public. And if you're committed to talk, huh?
I thought that any citizen could call, just like on P&Z, they say that we, like, what is it?
We
can't
can talk to
We
everybody,
can talk to everybody.
but they can only talk to someone.
I think that, I think to answer your question, in large part, that's the reason why we don't have an ordinance now is because, you know, it didn't present itself. There was nothing you could point to that said, we need an ordinance for that, you know, there was no, you know, part of what we're doing and what we've done, even in our charter commission, was to propose charter amendments because there was no prohibition. And, like, you could move away for a year and still attend city council meetings. And we made a recommendation to limit that, video participation.
Well,
So,
this
I mean,
goes back to what
but
we were
there's-
saying earlier about, I believe that if you're an elected official in this town, or if you serve on a board, just like you were on human services, right? And people come and talk to you, and you're in support of certain things, then the people that came to talk to you would then be a lobbyist. And that's not a good thing, because they're just citizens, and sometimes they're not even asking you for anything. Like I had one gentleman, he never asked me for anything. He just simply wanted me to understand, you know, why he felt the way he did, but he would accept any vote that we made, but he just wanted me to hear what he wanted me to hear. Do you know what I mean? It was not like, and I need you to vote for this, because it wasn't anything like that. It was just like, do you understand that I've lived here and I know that change is gonna happen, but this is why I don't like it. This might be a pro, but these are all the cons. Just think about that. That's, you know, sometimes you get people, so I don't really consider that a lobbyist, but I would hate to just put everybody in that. I don't know.
Well, it seems to me like nothing egregious has happened. I mean, I would be more inclined to think, okay, well, maybe we need to look into a lobby ordinance if there was something egregious that had happened and that really changed the course of events. But it doesn't sound like there's anything I don't know.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So when you think of lobbyists, what would you consider a lobbyist?
So I have three definitions of that somebody would have to self-report according to some of the other ordinances that are looked at. And none of those fall under the concerns that you guys have brought up, right? So, example. A person must register with the city secretary under the article if the person communicates directly with a member of the legislative or executive branch to influence municipal legislation or administrative action and makes or reasonably expects to make a total expenditure of $200 or more in a calendar quarter, or $800 or more in a calendar quarter, not including a person's own travel, food, or lodging expenses, or the person's own membership dues on activities described of this code to communicate directly with one or more members of the legislative branch executive. The second one, may reasonably expect to receive from another person compensation, reimbursement, not including reimbursement from the person's own travel, food, and lodging expenses of $200 or more in a calendar quarter, similar to the first one, but that's just basically saying receiving payment from another individual to do the work that is the lobbying. And then the third part is part of a person's regular employment that communicates directly with one or more members of the legislative and executive branch to influence municipal legislation. So it basically is just lobbyists, right? And would we know if we've had lobbyists speak to members of the city council currently? Would we know this? Is this something that we would know?
Only thing you would know is if they contributed to their campaign. funds.
Campaign finance.
That's it, right? So there's no way for us to know if there has ever in the past been an egregious example of something happening. If there is no system that registers when a lobbyist has come to speak to either a city council member or anything like that.
Check that.
So they have to self-register, right? So when we have it as our ordinance, and they come into the city and they speak to these, it's up to the lobbyist to make sure that they self-register and do that. Failure to do so, and then there's ordinances there that says exactly what happened. But when they register, they pay a membership, right? To say like, I am a lobbyist, I'm speaking to, they register that conversation. And they paid, the city makes money off of those lobbyists when they come in and show that they're actually trying to engage.
So we have I'll give you an example. We have a older building in San Marcos that is crumbling. It's decrepit. It's in a important part of town. It's not doing the community or the surrounding neighborhoods any good. There's divisive divisions on, you know what I'm talking about. A owner of it happens to live out of state. By that definition, he flies in, spends more than $200. He's a lobbyist.
Not including travel, expenses, food, or lodging. That does not matter. It's only if that person gets paid to do lobbying.
Well, by all rights, he owns it. He's trying to redevelop it, and he comes in and communicates with elected officials and other city members. Anyway, that's just an example
Right.
of someone who's made an investment in our community that now you got to label as a lobbyist. He
Well,
has to self-report and we have to report him.
No, because he's not getting paid by another person, right? You just said he owned it. So therefore, there's nobody else.
My guess is it's an LLC, and so he's being paid by the LLC.
That he would.
Yeah,
Yeah, so.
no, you don't own an LLC.
So there's no other human, right? There's no other human that owns that LLC that is paying. He would own that LLC,
Yeah,
right?
but you're making money off of your LLC is the point
Well,
he's making.
I get that.
So he would have to register according to your terms as a lobbyist because he's making a profit off of his LLC. So
And there
you
are-
sell it, you're making a profit.
There are cases of cities, I know Austin's one of them, has a lobbying ordinance, because we batted this around with the last lobbying ordinance. But council members had to report, like you had recommended the last time we talked. They had to report phone conversations or any correspondence or email, whatever, that they met with a a representative of the, that's all that was considered lobbyist. But council members in Austin earn about $100,000 a year, and they have $500,000 to $1 million staff members. They have chiefs of staff. They have people that can help them do that. Our council members don't even have offices. They have a locker room, literally, with a table in it and lockers where they can hang their coat and put their budget books. So when we were going round and round, we were like,
In most of these larger cities, my girlfriend is the number 2 person at the city of Houston. They, their mayor, if I'm correct, runs the city. I could understand why they would need stuff like that because they would have more to gain and we're set up in a different. type
or
of
like the
system.
county,
Or like yeah.
where you have the county judge and they have staff though. They have teams of people, but I don't even think they have a lobbying ordinance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, others? Yancy.
I guess I have another question. Would this prepare us maybe for the population growth that we're expecting?
So
Because, I keep hearing, we're gonna be growing at this rate, but then I'm also hearing we're not as big as Houston and so on, so.
I'm a firm believer that problems shouldn't be only tackled when they show up, right?
Wait, hold on.
Hold on, let's
I can't hear.
let Daniel
Yeah,
talk.
but I'm a firm believer that problems shouldn't be tackled only when they come up. We should preempt things. We should be proactive, right? So this would be in preparation of the growth, right? At some point, someone's gonna say, well, why didn't anyone ever talk about this? Why did we never do anything about it? This just sets us up for the changes that will later come up, right? And it doesn't have to be something insane that we're, because I keep hearing it from most of the members, it's the same. We're just not that city, right? We're not quite there yet, right? At what point are we deciding when that city was? Because at some point, Austin was our size, right? And at some point, Austin had to come up with shoes. We're gonna get there as well. Does that mean that we're 40 years into the future, 10 years into the future, 25 years? That's why I'd rather set the foundation now and then let them build, the city's gonna build us what it needs from us. That's the only like I said, it's gotta be proactive rather than reactive, because once it's reactive, then damage has been done and you could avoid it. So,
But we've had this before.
Had
It
what?
was a recommendation and city council action.
We had an ordinance.
We had an
We had a
ordinance.
written
Okay.
ordinance.
we had an ordinance proposed, right?
We had an ordinance considered, yes.
Considered.
But it
Yeah.
never-
So it
Nancy,
didn't
did you
have-
get your?
It didn't pass.
It didn't pass.
Hold on.
Yeah, because I want to make sure she's done a good
Yeah.
kind of questioning here.
I'm good for my questions right now. Maybe I'll think of something else if you have something.
To answer your question, what you're asking me about population, that's just census, and that's kind of, and that's plus or minus 5 to 10,000 there. It's all, but just in a general number, right now, the city, everybody pretty much agrees we're at about 85,000 right now.
But does that include Texas State?
Yeah.
Yes, of
that's
course it does.
It's a difficult, some yes,
They
some
count
no.
where they live.
That's why I was saying, plus or minus about 5,000 somewhere in there for,
And we have a higher daytime population.
yeah, that's why I'm saying, it's complicated, that's just a general.
Rob, do you have any thoughts on?
Yes, I do have thoughts, I wanna go back on this, I brought up before, the one time that I got hit by the lobbying, which was when we had a city council vote, that they were going to change, the way that we, there was a major change. And they called in, the realtors in the area called in the state realtor board to lobby. And they called me up and they said, hey, we're gonna put you on the line, who do you want to talk to on your city council? We'll get you right to them, give you their number and call them up for you so you can tell them how you feel on this. And, that kind of caught me, and I said, okay, but all right, you know what, I'm gonna go out and talk about it. And I'm gonna let everybody know that that's what they're up to, that's the game that's afoot. Now, I am always going to go for less regulation is better. I'm definitely more leaning towards John's feelings on this, Daniel, that I can see all sorts of gotchas for people like me that are activists that try to get people out there and get them fired up. Okay, so we've got in front of city council, that's coming up in front of city council, we've got that just went to the planning and zoning for the data centers. Okay, so you've got these people that are out there working hard right now that are citizen activists against these data centers. Are they lobbyists? How much are they doing? And that's the other side of the sword that I see. I'm more for free market, I'm more just let's let this be, because I can see it hurting both the citizen activists as well as, what we're trying to do is the lobbyists. I understand that we want to know who's trying to influence you, but I'm more concerned about who is funding your reelection campaign. Because that's that money that you are more beholden to than when people are coming and talking, because as John, when he was the mayor, if I called him up, I had as much sway as somebody else that called him up, because why? John knew that I would be down there at the city council meetings speaking my mind.
Regularly.
Regularly, yes. And much not to your liking. But that's, Daniel, that's where I'm gonna go ahead and side with John, okay? So.
Thanks for clarifying that, Rob. I know, is anybody else ready to say yes or no? I have Rob, no, me, no, Daniel, yes. Anybody else want to say?
No.
Or other
only
comments.
Because of what we're saying. I just keep asking, is there anything anywhere else that kind of regulates city council, like in the ethics part, to where it keeps them out of trouble is really
Well,
what.
there's a whole section in the charter.
Your financial disclosures is one thing, because that identifies, your potential conflicts, right? Financial, particularly, and then again, the campaign finance reports. Then we have the Open Meetings Act, which, of course, can't be, 9 of you commissioners on the P and Z can't be talking to the developer, so things like that are in place. Then, of course, the Public Information Act, people do this all the time. We want to see the emails, things like that. But no, there's not a specific lobbying ordinance. But there are other things that are kind of guardrails.
There are other things that kind of guardrail that.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not even saying this is really intended to be a guardrail so much. Maybe it is to some extent, but it seems like it's also intended to, if I was meeting with trade groups all the time as an elected official, which I wasn't, the day to day is Rob calling, bending my ear, or somebody trying to, invest in the community or build something in the community or hire people. And,
Sorry,
and personally, that's the job.
but nobody would know that. So
I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't say that definitively. I wouldn't have had to report that. But how many times on the dais do you hear people say, I spoke with so-and-so and he explained to me that this is how many gallons of water they're going to use, not what everyone's saying. He said, I called him and it was 250,000, not the 250 million that everybody's saying. And my point being, and I'm going to stand on this point, is that's okay. You're allowed to communicate. That's how we get to better. That's how you help make a decision. Communicate,
Just like. on
understand,
PhD,
get your questions answered.
We were told that we could talk to them, just be careful what you're saying. But that you could actually talk to, if a developer called me, I chose not to. But if a developer called me, I could actually talk to them and hear what they had to say, because usually it's like the data centers, for example. There's a lot of really bad misinformation about the data centers. So what I think they were trying to do is say, look, this is not true, that's not true. And our thing to them is bring it to the meeting and tell everybody. But I had no problem telling anybody. He called me, I told him to come to the meeting and tell everybody and clear it up, because you'll have an audience. So I don't know if everybody does that, but I was at that human services meeting and other things that I've been at council. And you would hear people actually get up there and say, well, I filled out my paperwork, or I talked to this person, or I talked to that person. It was like, oh, okay.
I get it. Everybody wants to think that people who want to build something, invest money, or hire people in this city are inherently against the interests of the city. I just do.
So,
But go ahead and finish your thoughts.
to me, it doesn't sound like whatever Daniela's proposing is targeting just regular people. It's targeting like,
He can't propose. I don't. mean to
Sorry.
interrupt. I'm so sorry.
no, it's okay,
He
clarify
can't-
language,
He
that's fine.
can't propose an ordinance language. That's not up to him. That's up to the elected officials.
Mhm.
He's proposing that the city council create an ordinance language. But what if the city council says, no, we do want all y'all, anybody's with an organization, because that's what you said last week.
Right, so.
If you were with an organization, you had to be reported as a lobbyist. And what if the city council takes that?
Council's going to do that.
Yeah.
So I did say that last week, but in all fairness, John said, you need to come back with a definition, right? Those were his words. Then I spoke to Sam and he's like, well, that's not really the charter's place, right? You don't come up with definitions. And I'm like, that's fair. We should leave it to council. So the stating of like, this is gonna target this, we don't know what it's gonna target because the city council hasn't
That's the point.
stated it, right? So therefore, it should be up to the city council I don't see anything wrong with asking the city council, consider this. I'm not telling the city council, it has to be this.
But you're asking this group
Right.
Yes, I am.
to do it on your behalf.
That was
I'm asking this to jump on board. That's-
Okay, I get it. That's fair. You are.
That's fair.
That is what you're doing.
What you're asking is for the board to make a recommendation
Yes,
to city council that they look at an ordinance for this rather than us adding this to the charter.
charter, yeah.
Okay? And I think if we boil it down to that, John, okay, that's what
That's
we're,
where we're at.
that's where we're at.
And that's the decision we need to make.
Yeah.
Do we want to do that? Yes, or do we not?
Okay.
And let Yancy finish.
Yeah.
She was-
I don't even know where.
I'm so sorry I interrupted you. You asked me about the language and I jumped in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it's 10 minutes back.
I think you were just saying what my intention was for this, right? My intention was to allow for them to make that decision, but to, is it?
Okay, well, I need to hear from the other three people.
I feel like they've already done that. From what John has said, I feel like, I just don't see the need for it now. I feel like they've been there, done that. The need hasn't arisen. I also feel like regular people will be, I would be cautious if I were a regular citizen and not as involved in understanding. I'm afraid it will keep citizen information from going forward. And I always love it when we have full citizen comment. I want to hear from the citizens. That helps me make a better decision for what the people of St. Louis want. And so I am afraid, there's a part of me that thinks this may shut down people. They're like, well, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't, I'm my lobbyist. I don't know. I have to register. And so that's one of my concerns. And because of that, if it does shut that down, I feel like less informed decisions would be made because we need to hear from you. And so I don't see the need for it now. I understand the concern, Daniel, and I so appreciate how you are so detailed, which is great, very detailed. And I appreciate that. I just don't see the need for it now. Especially since the city council already has considered it and they're like, we don't feel like we need it. I don't see that. I just don't see a big reason why we need it. I think they're overwhelmed with that thing, so I'm not really on board with having this.
So can I
Thank
ask
you.
you, when would you see a need for it?
If something egregious happens, and I know that's like you're saying, why wait until a problem occurs? But I also feel like San Marcos, I would like to keep it this friendly, small town feel, even if we have 80,000 people here. I would like people to feel like they can talk to their city officials, whether they're appointed or elected or they're volunteers. I'm afraid if we go to this kind of a structure, it gives it a whole different, entirely different feel. And I'm not ready to go there because I don't see the need.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you want to say where you're at?
I'm done.
Okay, gotcha. And Michelle,
No, simply because I feel that, I agree with a lot of what Amy's saying. And I also feel like council's been down this path before. And I thought it was a couple times, trying to come up with different things and it just never went anywhere. And I also thought that, we could only make recommendations about things that are actually in the charter now. Am I wrong about that?
we made one recommendation instead of that was requested. It was a council priority, and we made a statement about it in the final report. It wasn't a recommendation for amendment, but it was a recommendation about the request to make an amendment to the charter that we could not, and that was on single member
I
district.
just don't feel comfortable making recommendations to them. I thought that when we came in here, it was said that we would go through and make recommendations about things that were in
Charter
this charter
changes, yes.
and changes. But that's not even in here, so I don't really, that's my reason,
Yes.
I don't really
So,
feel comfortable.
I can read you the language if you want.
Well, the language is there. You can read it, Sam, but to be clear, that was only because it was on a requested amendment proposal that they asked us to discuss. So it was related to the charter. When
In
we
this
were
case, though, I think it is germane because we are switching over and we are creating a new section for for ethics. You know, whether I agree with it or not, I do see where he's coming
But
from.
we're not creating a new section, we're just moving some of the things that are in the charter
Sure.
to just kind of make it more clear. But we don't have the
That's true.
authority to make a new section, so that's not,
all we did was renumber the existing ethics section to 12 and we moved, what is it called? Miscellaneous,
It's a general provision.
general
maybe
provisions to
13.
13 instead of them being combined.
So, but. So from what, if I'm understanding this right, Daniel is wanting council to consider, right? So by us saying no, we're not letting them consider, we're making that decision here. Right?
No. We're just not recommending.
Exactly.
They can consider it they can put it on the next meeting. They can.
It doesn't have to.
Yeah.
it doesn't have to come from us, but the
Daniel
only
can go to
reason
two.
I like. what
Two
you're saying,
council members.
the only reason I'm comfortable with it is because I stand on what I'm saying. It's not really a part of this to make a recommendation or a change. Does that make sense? Like, we don't have a lobbying anything in this charter, right?
That's correct.
So if we don't have a lobbying section, why are we making a recommendation? Because I was told at the beginning of this that we only make recommendations or submit changes or make a recommendation for a change for something that's in the charter. Like, we're not supposed to be discussing things that are not in the charter to bring forward. That's the only reason I'm standing on this, because the first thing that's gonna happen is when we go to council to give our report, why are y'all even discussing that or giving us direction about something that you're not even supposed to be doing? And I guarantee you that will be said.
And do you want to do that?
If you
Go,
want-
yeah.
So here are the things this charter commission do. Propose any recommendations that may deem desirable to ensure compliance with provisions of the charter by the several departments, of the city government. So, and then propose, if it deems desirable, amendments to the charter to improve the effective application of said charter to current conditions. Provide a final report. The chair or designated member of the commission shall report its findings and present its proposed amendments pending to the city council. So yeah, it does tend to speak to the charter.
It has been the practice at times over the years that there was just something that didn't have consensus. And in our case, last time, it was a recommended charter change, single member districts. That's not in the charter either. We suggested a public education then. As we pointed out, Michelle joined me at the city council, not one of them in the last 4 years put it on the agenda. Did I not say that to them? I said, 2 of you could easily put it on the agenda tomorrow.
And they seemed like they didn't even have an interest to do it then, and I asked questions later, and they said, have you seen the report that came out that we're at a deficit? Well, yeah. And so if you've seen all these things, you understand why that's not a priority right now. So it's like,
So on that one of the things too, is I guess it was the idea that after the council studied, I think, if I'm recalling the discussion, it was the idea that it would still be a vote of the citizens and as to the charter, because the charter says single member districts. So it is a recommendation as to the charter, but the recommendation is before anything gets on the ballot, run it through that, whatever, that process, the study process. So in that sense, it is a recommendation in relation to the charter.
a little bit
Well,
different.
Stan,
Okay.
I'm sorry, John, you're still, two of us, you've got three
No,
open.
I have 4 people who've weighed in.
but I want to know from what
Go.
you just read, Sam, could Daniel's recommendations, his proposal fit under any of those guidelines for what this commission does?
Well, propose any recommendation desirable to ensure compliance with the provisions of the charter. That'd be the closest one.
Yeah.
Not even 3.
Propose if it deems desirable amendments to the charter to improve the effective application of the charter. So,
We're not
That-
changing
that
the
would be-
charter, it's for an ordinance, right?
well,
Making recommendations.
now. Right, it's
Let me jump in.
about the charter.
Because I think I know where we're going here, and that's okay, even if it were completely appropriate to do. And I would say that if this commission, sorry, felt extremely strongly about an issue, enough to write a recommendation separate from the charter, proposed charter amendments, then that's fine. But I'm not hearing 4 people at this point that feel that way. So I don't want to cut off our discussion, but we've spent quite a bit of time on it. So if anybody feels like they want to change that position, now's your chance. If not, I'm gonna assume that the 4 that said they're, we're gonna leave it at where it is. It's still in that position, and that's okay. That's the way it works. So I do want to ask, I really need to take a few minutes break. When we get back, if we can wrap up with any additional conversations that anybody might want to introduce, that we could finish by 8, that would be great. And then Rob, before we go, we're going to ask you on TV here, can you make the meeting 2 Thursdays from now? The 28th,
April 24th.
I will be out of town on the 24th.
out of town.
Now, we do have Zoom as an option, but I don't know if that's.
Let me see on the
Prefer.
24th. I can do the Zoom. That's true. I can make it on Zoom. I'll get myself to a spot to
You
do
to be
that.
here on the 23rd, maybe?
What's your schedule, Travis?
No, I'm flying. So I'm going over for another service. So.
Yeah, first condolences for that.
So that's just, I'm gonna be out that Wednesday, the
Well, then you don't
23rd
need
to
to
the
do
30th.
it. You're there. at the-
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of my.
And when do you get
I
back?
can if you need.
When do you get
I'll be
back?
back on Wednesday, the 30th.
When do you fly out, that Monday prior?
I fly out that Wednesday, the 23rd.
Maybe we do it. No, we'll have-
The following Thursday?
I mean, if need be on that Thursday, I can, that Thursday
No.
night.
No, I don't want you to do that.
No, you be with your family.
No, I mean, I can.
We have the following Thursday.
Yeah, that would be May 1st.
Yeah.
Would that work for y'all?
That works. Yes, I'll be back.
Daniel,
Think so.
let me, if you don't mind, let me just bring up that up. May 1st.
Y'all don't have any city hall committee, board meetings? Okay,
That's me.
it's Thursday, May 1st. Is that correct? Thursday.
The 20th?
No, 20th is.
No, they did something for a Monday. I've got something for City Hall for a Monday. Was it
Oh,
May
that's-
19th or something?
Was it today? 21st.
No,
Well-
it says May 19th. It was a Monday. I thought it was strange. It came from,
What is it?
payment for City Hall.
Looks
meeting.
pretty open.
Oh, I don't have city. hall, so I don't-
Oh,
I don't
okay.
have
Okay.
it. Yeah, okay. That's okay. That's why I don't have it.
John, do you have?
That'll,
I do
that'll
have
still
it.
keep us on schedule, John, with what we need.
I think it's not till May 19th
Okay.
on Monday because they wanted to take something.
Yeah, it is May 19th. It's not May 1st. Okay, so here's the deal. Go.
Question, have we moved on from,
Yeah, we're
The-
done with our discussions,
okay, cool.
for now.
Okay.
We have a little bit of time after the break to consider anything else. But I wanted to nail down this scheduling because we gotta be here because we're planning on
6th.
May sixth at council, and that would need to be finished by, what day do they
That's why.
print the agenda?
We'd have to get everything to them on.
So you're gonna be out of town.
I have a parks meeting.
We would just have to supply the backup material by, on that Friday after the meeting.
Can you do that?
We can do it, you know, I don't know if we'll get pushback, but yeah, some of our agendas are published Friday, so it could be done. It's a little compressed, but it can be done.
Okay, so what are other options?
What's next Monday? What is this
Zoom
next
in
coming Monday?
Thursday,
What's this next coming Monday? Because Wednesday we have Jim Barber's service.
okay, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
This next
When is that?
Wednesday.
Wednesday at
The 16th.
at the same place that we work the headquarters, Meadow Center. That's the 16th.
So we are.
And Rob, you leave on the 23rd.
I leave on the 23rd, return on the 30th.
Well, I can do any time next week except on the 16th. You know, I don't know what y'all's schedules.
So the idea, we would have to have essentially the proposed final report
Yeah.
at your Thursday meeting on the Thursday,
May 1st.
the first. And hopefully that's 90% hopefully acceptable, and maybe the commission has a few tweaks or amendments. And then we have to submit that Friday morning to the clerk to get in the agenda packet for council. But if, you know,
No, I don't think we can do it next week because Sam has to prepare legal ballot language for each of these.
Oh.
So it's a labor intensive on this.
That seems like the best.
I can make a commitment. I would be here the first. We just need, I don't know if your flight's gonna make it or.
No, I'll be back. I mean, all things considered, you know, consider me on the 1st that I will be here.
But we'd have to
And
be
like I
here
said,
on time.
I'm still open to that Zoom meeting on the 24th. That way, we're not pushing it quite as hard.
what time zone are you in at that time?
2 hours behind. I'll be in Arizona, they're on, they don't do daylight savings, so it's 2 hours.
So it'd be 3:30, 4:30 for you?
Yeah, or wait,
3:30.
3:30.
But that's not.
But that's
gonna
not a
interfere with
service
the-
day or?
No, we're doing stuff on Friday and Saturday, it's just preparation mostly.
I mean, if you're willing to do that, that
I
would,
think that really would be the easiest, to be honest with you.
It would-
Not easiest, but
it
that
would take
way we're not pushing it up against the wall. I don't like to do that to Sam. I don't like to do that because that's where mistakes happen.
okay.
So
That's fine.
I will-
Basically, we're just gonna be going through each of the recommendations in the legalese that would be a ballot language.
Because gives us a little bit more time. I'm agreeable to that, so if that'll work.
I mean, we all agreed to that next 2 Thursdays from now, so if you want to keep that, we need to start on time, and I'm not gonna have an ending time just in case. Because we gotta finish.
Okay.
So it's the last meeting. And then we take a final vote at the end on everything. You know, really hoping we're unanimous on all that stuff, but whatever. We're not.
I mean, if there is anything that still leaves us the first, but we have, you know, if there's anything that.
I guess I'm saying, I'm hoping it's unanimous on the final report.
Right,
We
but I'm
have
just
got
saying-
final reports that work.
But that gets us 95% of the way there.
Yeah.
That if there's
And then
anything
Sam
that's
has the
still,
time.
You know, we can do that.
And on that unanimous final report, that's kind of like the concept with CIP, right? You go through the debates and some projects and individual, you know, disagreements, but you all, the CIP overall report is approved usually unanimously, right? It's like
Same way with budget.
kind of that
You're
concept.
hoping not everybody gets everything.
Okay.
All right, so you're gonna Zoom. Okay. All right, let's take a 3 to 5 minutes and then let's reconvene and,
Can we,
okay.
Okay.
So let's just bring us back. We're reconvening at 7:45. Is there anything else that anybody wants to raise that we can have a reasonable conversation of in 15 minutes?
I got one final thing. This will be probably the last thing that I propose, and it's something that we have talked about, the last time we were here. And it was, plain language. You had asked, what does that even mean? Look more into it. You told me to look at the budget from the previous year, look at the budget, talk with Sam. There's definitely a lot of mention within the budget of items that aren't easily discernible as to what exactly they mean. And I think that there's a perfect place here in our financial procedure. And yeah, within the financial procedure, so probably here, let me see, what was it compared to other years of the budget?
What
Budget
section?
public record. 805.
805?
8.05.
Okay.
And Sam had mentioned to me that there is actually a staff member, I believe, that looks at some of the other stuff that the city puts out and makes sure that the language is much more accessible, but that budget is not one of those items that gets looked at as far as making sure that there's accessibility.
Well, I don't know if they don't look at that. I don't know, I don't want to say that.
Okay.
But their job is
Is
they
to,
look at things that the city puts out.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But if we could just put that within this, already fit within the chart, to make sure that it's on there, because like I looked at, and I still have it up, and I found some examples. I know, I know Rob had asked me at the time, he's like, I'd be interested if you could come up with some examples.
Yeah, or some language, and that was.
And,
I appreciate you going through and looking at that with fresh, that's what I wanted, was some fresh eyes on that.
So what are you saying that?
oh, so, we talked about having a legend at the bottom that, you can note or explain what it actually means, because there's some of these that are like,
There's some gobbledygook there.
That looks like it doesn't really.
Remember, like it's abbreviated or nothing, but
Yeah,
it's like.
there's abbreviations for things.
there are abbreviations.
No, it's
Jargon.
Okay.
It's one of the first meetings. John, one of those.
So you want to add a sentence to 805,
Yes,
or is
that-
it more than a sentence?
no, just a sentence.
What does
A
it say?
sentence, that states, budget and all supporting, schedule shall be filed with the city clerk and submitted to the city council shall be record. The city manager shall provide copies. It's in between that first sentence and city manager. I just don't know the name of the position. That's my question. I don't know the name of the position that does that.
Well, the position may not always be
Her
there.
job, her title just changed, but, and I can't think of her new title, but I know the person you're talking about is Griselle.
What is the action that you?
Diversity, inclusion, equity?
Yeah, and they've changed the name recently, but
Oh.
yeah,
But what does
Griselle
it
got
say?
So
What's it?
budget and all supporting schedules shall be filed with the city clerk and submitted to the city council. So right there where it says filed to the city clerk and submitted to the city council, it's not even a sentence, it's just a portion that needs to be changed there to add something like, and be not necessarily proofread, but, what was the word?
Define.
Explain.
how about refined for, shall be reviewed for clarity?
Reviewed for clarity by an official, or a staff member.
For
To
clarity.
ensure,
Okay,
clarity.
There you go.
hate to throw in a,
Okay, fair.
but this is an action after council approval. Because you're talking about budget of a public record and the budget shall be filed and distributed. So you're talking about some other non-elected person making possible changes to a budget that a council approved, that won't fly.
No, not changes. It's
Do we move to?
Changing language,
expounding. It's to
Adding
make it
language?
clear. Well, it's-
Clarify.
Okay,
well,
it's
clarifying means changing.
clear. Not really.
Okay,
If I were to ask you.
What if we
So-
move it back up to like 803, 804, where you're talking about proposed budgets and submission?
I think that's an excellent point because the budget is adopted
It's
by
a document,
ordinance.
yeah.
And the minute it's adopted, it is the ordinance, and that is a good clarification. I hadn't actually
Should I
thought
say
about.
go before? 805 is what you're saying?
That's what I'm recommending that as a
Well,
possible.
805 is after the fact.
Yeah,
Right.
So you're,
There can be
The
no
idea is-
changes after the fact.
before it gets to the council for approval,
Also reparations.
the perhaps the staff has reviewed it to try and have it
clarity to the general.
for
public.
clarity.
Clarity to the general public.
And that's one of those things that you can never, just to be clear though,
Yeah, you can.
you can't have a. There will be somebody who says, I don't understand this, but if there's an effort to always
You
strive for,
could,
you
you
know.
could use the word
Clarity.
endeavor,
Yes. Yeah.
endeavor to, and then endeavor to,
Endeavor to be honest with you, last time we kind of got hung up on the word plain language, but there's an actual government website called plainlanguage.gov.
okay,
And that would be where we can pull our guidelines from, right? So it's no longer subjective, there are actual guidelines by the federal government that is meant for clarity for everyday citizens on anything that any government puts out, right?
okay.
So when we say plain language, we always refer to plain
Okay.
language.
So endeavor to use the word plain language. What do you want to? Plain language.
Endeavor to clarify through using plan.
Through use of plain language.
Now, yeah, because.
Whenever possible.
Make sure that I'm on the same page with you, that I'm remembering correctly. When we were going through the budget, there were some things on there that may have been abbreviated or something, and you were saying, what does that mean, or I don't understand that.
Yes,
So I thought that in our last conversation, we were gonna do an index that was a glossary to say, this is what these words mean,
See, I think that would be,
or these are what these abbreviations mean.
but
Is that,
to put that in
They
a
do.
charter amendment, like, we're gonna go, I'm not taking, I don't wanna take a policy position, because that's
no,
not
but
my
that's
role.
what we discussed,
But
is all I'm saying.
the practical side of that is in the charter, trying to anticipate the words that are gonna go in a future document. I thought the idea was to tell the people preparing the budget that they need to look at it with an eye toward simplicity,
yes.
or not simplicity,
Plain language.
understanding.
Clarity, yeah, clarity, right?
So,
Okay, I just was
That's what I
under the
thought.
impression that.
Well,
we were
one
gonna
person's
have
clarity
a
is another person's.
Right, I guess. I'm-
My clarity is,
So
you
do we have wording? I mean, there's two things. Number one is the wording. Number two is where it gets placed.
So my understanding based on John's recommendation there, it obviously can't be done at 8:05, so then it would probably belong at probably at 8:02 preparation and submission of the budget.
so
so 802, adding a section, D, endeavor
to do
to
that.
blank in plain language whenever possible.
So,
Proposed budget, it could be C and then push C into D, yeah, afterwards.
so one of the things there is, again, we don't know job titles, those people
Right.
are around, so what's common is the city manager or her designee, or their designee, city manager or their designee.
No, I don't want to get into who has to do it. Why don't we
Just-
just say it? Endeavor to create a budget using plain language wherever possible. Or
Okay.
endeavor to publish a
And see,
budget.
but what if someone says it's plain, see, that's why I like, because
Well-
you're
Well,
really
he's
talking
just
about
saying,
abbreviation.
There's a website.
There's a website from the federal government that explains what is plain
Should we
language.
put the website in there?
That's,
No. No.
Even that is guidance, because there is going to be stuff people will still debate,
Yeah.
right,
but it's the idea of, I think, striving
it's the pursuing of trying
to
to.
pursue.
How about this?
No one's saying that you'll reach it.
How about this?
No, I was with you because I just thought that what you were saying before meant
Was only
something else. And I
abbreviations.
think we heard the same thing.
So it's not just abbreviations, right? But that, in the pursuit of that, you tackle abbreviations, you tackle any language that is not known to the average person, and then we at least have federal
See,
guidance.
that's the
for
part
this.
right there. Language that would only be known to city staff, like those abbreviations, somehow need to be clarified, but you have to figure out a wording for that. Because when I'm listening to what he's saying now, it's different than what we talked about before, and I'm like, well, what is plain language? To just the ordinary, not me, but just to the ordinary citizen, well, okay, but I still don't know what that means. You know what I'm saying? If you're looking at abbreviated words, there's gotta be somewhere,
It's endless.
it's endless, so
But hold-
you have to figure out a way.
Hold on a second. I think it's pretty clear here where you could, in 802C, at the very last run-on sentence, which runs really on, it says, and I'll read it. City manager, I'm just gonna read it. Not less than 30 days prior to the time the city council makes the tax levy for the final fiscal year shall file with the city clerk a proposed budget, which budget shall provide a complete financial plan for the fiscal year, contain a budget message explaining the budget, contain an outline of the proposed financial policies of the city for the ensuing fiscal year, setting forth the reasons for salient changes from the previous fiscal year in expenditure and revenue items, and explaining any major changes in financial policy. And that's where you could enter and endeavor, let's make it more run-on, to use plain language whenever possible. And I think that's
Like spell it out,
That's-
so people know what it is.
That's simple enough to, it'll be interpreted and it's endeavor to. You can't always use plain language when you're talking about numbers.
That was in an endeavor to use plain language.
Plain language.
Simple.
Plain language.
Whenever possible.
And I'm sure they'll ask and
But that's.
I'll
the whole-
say, go to the website,
But that's the whole idea.
plainlanguage.com.
Putting the city staff on notice of when they're preparing these things. Will be one of the things, like, oh, well,
It's not easy.
let's look at it with an eye toward.
Utilize.
It may not be perfect, but I think they will look at it with some intentionality as they're writing these budgets. Oh, yeah, these.
Endeavor to
legends.
utilize
We need a
plain
legend.
language whenever possible.
Never to
Okay.
utilize.
Plain language whenever possible.
Yeah, you could still not have to have the run-on sentence, but you could say all the while endeavoring to use plain language whenever possible. right?
Endeavoring.
Right, it could be a run-on sentence or it can be an added sentence, either way.
I can tell you that city council understands the word endeavor.
Okay.
They use it a lot.
Gotcha.
So it is city council speak.
I just, rather than heading into the run-on, I just go ahead and make it the next sentence.
That's what I was saying,
Just
the next sentence.
instead of an and, just endeavor to use plain language whenever possible,
Okay.
period.
I mean, did you say it's a
Okay.
separate sentence
Or
or
it's a separate sentence.
This is how
Rather
plain
than
language comes up. Communication that is clear, concise, and easy for everyone to understand.
There you
Avoiding jargon and complex wording and focusing on simple language and sentence structure.
Whenever possible.
That's what we want.
Whenever possible.
Whenever possible, because, yeah.
And we're gonna allow them to endeavor to because sometimes you just can't.
Yeah.
And people should have to understand.
No, I think that addresses.
Concept.
I think that
It's not-
addresses-
Sounds like we have a consensus.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that.
Thing.
And I'm sorry, Daniel.
I'm glad you caught that, you're right. Once the budget's adopted,
I understand.
yes, in the draft, so.
All right.
Yes.
Okay,
All right.
all right. So it looks like we have our schedule for the 20. What day is that? 24th, Thursday, 5:30. Everybody be here on time. Rob log in a little bit ahead of time.
Sure.
And because we've got a lot of work to do, but we've got to finish it that day. So it'll be, and I'm sure I don't see any reason why we would. We'll get you the language wording out prior to the meeting. So please take a look at that, the written language of these proposed
And
changes.
would we be able to bring up one more thing that we might, for that next meeting?
You can,
I'm
I'm gonna say you can. No,
All together.
there's no. You just bring it up then.
Okay,
Yeah,
Because I
'cause-
just have one more thing
I
that I
know.
think is important.
and you will have all the time you need at the next meeting.
Well,
We don't have time to debate whether we're gonna talk about it.
24th instead of the first, so
Yeah, no, we got time. Okay, so, that being said, I'll go ahead and call us adjourned at exactly 8 p.m.
I like it.